Harrison, welcome to the Better Project podcast. It's great to have you here and great to have a bit of a chat about the shrooms before, but I think the basis of today's conversation, which we spoke about, was fathers in business and the fact that you don't have to sacrifice your own health and your family to be successful in life. I'm very curious, like, for people who don't know who you are and a bit of a backstory on you, what kind of shaped you onto this journey that you're on now?
So, Harrison Orr, for people that are tuning in, I left school and then started my chefing apprenticeship. And a month after I started that, had my first seizure, got diagnosed with epilepsy. And so for quite a few years after that, was having kind of regular seizures. Every couple of months, without any warning or cue sign, would just have a seizure. And then eventually got out of chefing, went into PT because I'd always loved training. Like when I started chefing, I couldn't obviously play sport anymore, working weekends and nights. So went heavy into the gym, down that kind of route. And then a few years into that journey, I saw someone online talking about like the nervous system and stress and sleep and the importance of that when it came to health and performance. And like this was 6-7 years ago now, and so I hadn't really seen anyone talking about that stuff. Like everyone was talking about like your macros or your training split and all this other stuff, but there was none of that deeper level stuff. And so that really resonated with me, especially from a stress and a nervous system standpoint because of the epilepsy, right? Like my triggers were alcohol, sleep deprivation, and stress. And so those are pretty, like having a seizure is a pretty dire consequence if you're not managing those things. And so I started getting coaching from this guy and from his team. And then eventually when COVID hit, they offered me a job. They had a position come up. And so I left the chefing and the PT, went into that, which was about 5 years now. And then so we focused on health from a nervous system standpoint. So we were operating off a system which we called the hierarchy of health. So at the base of that, you've got your nervous system. Above that, you've got your digestive system and your endocrine system, then your immune system. And on top of that was like your nutrition and training. And so like from that nervous system place, like if you've got an optimal nervous system, you can handle stress a hell of a lot better. You can sleep a hell of a lot better. You make better decisions. And then consequently, especially for guys, you've got high levels of testosterone, which means you can perform better. You can think clearer, make better decisions, like have better sex drive, do all that cool stuff. And since working on my nervous system, tracking my sleep, like being so mindful of that, this March, it'll be 7 years since I've had a seizure. I don't have to take medication for that anymore. Like I've had that kind of under wraps because of that, even since having a child and all the sleep deprivation and stress and figuring things out that comes with that. And then about a couple of years ago now, I think it's 3.5 years ago now, got into mushrooms as well. So I had a friend suggest medicinal mushrooms and was really impressed by the effects of those and was like, wow, these are just mushrooms. That's cool. And so I went down that rabbit hole of cool. How do you grow a mushroom? How do you make a tincture? And then trialed those, loved them, gave them to a few friends and the other coaches I was working with and got some awesome feedback from them as well. And then we started offering them to clients, and then Primal Energies kind of grew from that. I never intended to start a mushroom business. It wasn't like I had this business plan. I'm like, cool, this is a growing market. I can make some coin here and stuff like that. Even up until where it is now, it's just been this organic growth of like, oh, that was cool. What's the next thing? Oh, that would be cool. What if we try this thing? And then so it's just taken that organic growth as well. And I guess so is the coaching piece as well. So, I was with James Kant was his name for a couple of years. And then at the start of last year, he wanted to move on. So folded that business, and myself and some of the other coaches kind of formed our own entity. And so essentially became a co-founder of that coaching business. So the 2024 was the first year that I was solely on, I guess, my own generated income. Like there was no salary coming in. It was all between Primal and coaching, which is, it's stressful. If you've had that security of a stable income in some capacity, that's like, cool, I can play around with this. If it makes money, cool. If it doesn't, then like, it's not a big deal because I've got my needs met in this other area. And so that massively shifted, I guess, my coaching perspective and the way that I had to balance things as well, because now you're not just doing a job, you've got everything that is entailed in running a business, right? You've got marketing, you've got back end systems and like automations, and you've got all that stuff. You've got client acquisition, trying to generate leads, the content. You've got everything, and then after all that, you've got your coaching calls, and you've got the actual thing that you want to do. Which, you know, when you're trying to juggle that plus being a father to a young child, and also support my wife through her journey. She also owns her own business as well, so it put a different lens on things, right? Like, it's one thing to understand like stress and like how to support people, but you know, having personal experience and doing a lot of that, just it adds a different lens and complexity to it, right? But also adds a different trust factor too when you're talking to people. You're like, yeah, I do it, right? It hits different if someone's telling you how to be a parent, but they've got no kids. You're like, cool, great in theory, bro. But like, I'm going to talk to someone that's been there, right?
Yeah, and I totally understand where you're coming from, because I'm in the beginning stages of I just transitioned out of my safety, my security of a day job into my business full time. And yeah, it's scary, but there's also that sense of freedom, like you're living life on your terms now. And even though it's stressful and you've got to work a lot harder, it's not really work because you enjoy it. Like, you just love, I guess for me, it's like a bit of the chase of building something. But the biggest thing that I've been struggling with is I don't know if there's such thing as balance, but it's like how you can build the business but then still be there for not only yourself but for your family. Because there's days where I'm with my daughter all day and my mind's like, oh, I need to be doing this for the business. Because I need to build the business so that I can pay for my family. So it's like that give and take there. How did you kind of deal with that?
I think with that balance, and I think it's also worth noting that, and I think this will take a lot of that pressure off trying to find that balance, because it's insinuated that we'll find this balance and then awesome, it's just about maintaining this for like the rest of like life. But I think it can take the pressure off that, and just recognizing that like we go in seasons, right? Like, you'll go in a season of, you know, when you first kind of set up this full studio, okay, cool, well, I need to build this, set everything up, and then once I've got set up, then it's like a different level of, I guess, execution and task, right? It doesn't take like all day or night. There's not as many deadlines to kind of get that done. So you go through this little bit of a sprint, and then you're like, okay, cool. It's not like you dial back, but then you're like, okay, I've got things a little bit more stable now. Maybe I've got an extra few clients, or I've got things working, then I can have more time with like for your health or for the family and things like that. And so having those seasons, I think, can make it easier as well. But I think one of the hardest things, and this is something that I think I know I definitely am, and I know most of us will probably be working on for eternity, is trying to find that balance as well, or trying to find that sweet spot between still growing the business, feeding that fulfillment and that area, but also being able to actually be present when we're with our kids and with our partner as well. Because it's one thing to be physically there, like, okay, cool, I'm not sitting at my desk, I'm not working, I'm not doing anything, but like you said, like your mind is somewhere else. And you know, when they're little, you can kind of get away with it, but then as they get older and you've got someone that's actually trying to have a conversation with you, like, as adults, we can tell when someone is off in la la land, right? You can tell when someone's not really listening, whether it's a partner or a friend or someone else you're having a conversation with. You can tell that you don't have their full attention. And so finding that, I feel like that's a muscle, like that's an ability that we need to kind of work on, is just being present. And I think thinking that only applies to parenthood can kind of limit us as well. Because if you can just work on just being present, regardless of what you're doing, it'll make you so much more effective when you're at work, so that you don't need to be thinking about work when you're at home. Like if you're at work and you're just thinking about work, you're not thinking about what you're doing later, you're not thinking about what you're having for dinner, you're not thinking about your session later, or you know, your kids or anything like that. You're just like, what's in front of me, this is what I'm working on. And then having that ability to acknowledge that distraction but bring it back to the center, like bring it back to that present moment. Then when you get to the end of the day, you can go through that. You know, I personally have a bit of a routine that I have at the end of my day, which allows me to just stop, switch off, and like, okay, switch from, you know, business mode to father and husband mode. And then cool, I'm where I need to be. I don't need to worry about trying to go back and itch back and send that email, or I don't need to worry about what I need to do tomorrow. Because I've been in that space where I've worked right up until, my wife and son will walk in the door, or till I've had to go get him, and I feel interrupted. I don't feel like I've closed the book for the day.
Yep.
It's still open, and so it's still open in my mind that I need to get back there. As soon as he goes to bed, as soon as we finish dinner, I just need to send this email. I just need to finish this thing. And it's never quite finished. And so I almost feel like, when I recognize this, I felt so shit that I felt inconvenienced by my son and my wife.
Yes, I've had that feeling.
That sucks, right? It sucks when it feels like your own offspring and your wife are an inconvenience in your life. Like, that's harsh. And so having that little bit of a routine, like I'll purposely stop 20 minutes before I have to go get my son, or before everybody gets home, to close all my tabs. Like, if it's during the week, plan tomorrow. So tomorrow's just action. I don't need to set up, cool, what am I doing for the day? Calendar's already done. And then, awesome, I've closed everything, and I'm lucky enough to be in a position where no one's going to call me for an emergency, so I can put my phone down.
Yeah.
And then just be with them. And that takes practice. But I think that has massively helped me in just being present with what I'm doing. And naturally, you don't feel so stressed because you're not trying to run 20 different tabs in your mind, and you can have a better conversation with someone. And then as a consequence, you have a better connection with someone. You have a better conversation with someone. The person you're talking to feels heard as well. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like talking to your missus, or just talking to like any female in general, and you hear the words and you respond to them, but they keep repeating themselves. And you're like, I heard you so many times. Like, why are you still saying it? It's like, because they didn't feel heard. Like, you said that you heard them, but they don't feel acknowledged. And that took me a while to learn. Like the feminine, the females, like they don't want that logistical, they don't want that like mental like acknowledgement. It's like they need to feel it. And so that for me only comes with being present, and like being able to read between the lines almost. It's like, what is she actually saying or trying to communicate by this, if that makes sense?
Yeah. How long you been with your partner?
Wife. Yeah. So in March it'll be married 3 years, and together 6.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been with my partner 9 years this year, I think.
Nice. Yeah.
The biggest thing that I'm trying to get better at is like the listening and the communication part.
Yep.
Especially now, with the business, I'll be honest, I'm in the period now where I'm just working.
Yep.
And like my family get home and I spend a bit of time, but mine's elsewhere. As soon as my daughter goes to bed, back on the laptop. Yep. And I work all the way to midnight, and then I go to sleep, wake up, train, and it's just like cycle repeats.
Yep.
And it's like, I know within me I need to be more present, but then I also find it hard when, if I do be present, I feel guilty for not working on the business. Then when I'm working on the business, I feel guilty for not being with the family. It's like a fucking never ending.
Like, you never win.
Yeah.
Right? No matter what you do, you're always in the wrong or should be somewhere else. I guess, what would it look like if you had to be, if you were present? Like, what would have to change, do you think?
Definitely put my phone down for starters.
Yeah.
Because even I've had times and I feel like shit when this happens. Even my daughter goes, "Get off your phone, Dad." Ooh. And I'm like, I'm just replying to a client's message. Okay. I'm like,
yep.
All right, I'll get off it. But yeah, it's a difficult one. But it really is that easy, just putting the phone down.
Yeah.
It's just, we just get caught up in our mind that we have to do this.
Yeah.
It's more so a psychological thing more than anything.
Yeah, we feel like it can't wait.
Yeah, when reality is it can, but then what I'm learning is you have to set those boundaries, because if you don't set boundaries in like your business, for example, you're going to have people contacting you all the time. Yeah. And then you will feel like you can't be with your family because you always got to work on the business.
Yep.
And that's going to be a hole that's going to be hard to get out of.
Yep. I've worked with a couple of guys that have, they say that that's what they pride themselves on for their business, is that speed of reply. So even if it's like 8, 9 o'clock at night, they'll still answer the call. They'll still get back to them. And that you put yourself in a tricky situation then, if that's the standard that you gauge yourself by and your business by, if you're just always accessible. Because every time, there's always the duality. Like every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Like every time you say yes to taking that call while you're supposed to be with your daughter or with your kid, then you're subconsciously saying that this is more important than you. Like that I would rather be taking this call or working than spending this time with you. And kids kind of pick that up. Like they know when they don't have your full attention, and then that teaches them that, okay, well, that's where dad's priorities are. That I'm here. I'm below work. Like they don't have the concept of like money and like, the consequences of that. But that's harsh for your kid to feel like, oh, I come second or third to these other things. And like you said, it's hard to set those boundaries, to put them in place. But I think the more mature people that you speak to that have those healthy boundaries, and I think it's another art in itself to be able to communicate those effectively. Like you can't just say like no and be an asshole about it, because then people will get shitty about it. But like if you can communicate those boundaries in a way that I guess people will understand, like most people are going to be understanding of like, dude, I don't answer calls after 6 because I spend time with my family. No one's gonna like get up at you about that. Like that's a pretty reasonable like situation, right? But it's also how you kind of communicate that too. So I think setting those boundaries is a massive part, like having them, but then also communicating them to people as well, so that everyone's on board. Like if you just suddenly implement this boundary and like you don't communicate it to either your clients or your team or even your partner, if you're setting boundaries in a certain space, and they're used to a certain level of response or whatever it is, and it just stops. Like people get frustrated by that. But if you can communicate like, hey, I'm just trying to be more present so that I can give you a better service, so that I can be a better husband, a better father, so that I can be more intentional with what I'm doing and just show up better, I don't think there's anyone that's going to be mad about that.
And if they are, I don't think you should be doing work with them anyway.
I don't think they're the people that you want to impress anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. And on the topic of being present with your family, I think there's a misunderstanding where, particularly men, I would say I want to give my kids everything, and that's why I'm building the business, to give them everything. But in reality is, if you're busy all the time building your business, your kids don't care about that. They just want your time.
Yeah, 100%.
They want to create those memories and feel like their parent actually cares about them.
Yeah.
You can buy them all the flashy stuff they want. They don't give a shit.
No. But then like the consequence of that eventually is like what you create a spoiled kid.
Exactly.
And then so the biggest value that we can provide to kids isn't what we give them. It can be what we teach them, what we show them. And before I became a father, when like my wife was pregnant, so we were getting ready for this, one of the other coaches that I was working with, and he was mid-40s, had 3 kids, and I was talking about, like being a provider, because that's, you ask most, first-time dads, like what they want to do, like what kind of dad they want to be, and that's probably one of the most commonly used terms. Like they want to be the provider of the family, the household, of like all these things. And in that, it's assumed like the financial provider, right? We don't really think of that as providing lessons, emotional stability, or like, all the other things that kind of come with it, experiences, adventures. And he said, or he asked me, he's like, think back to your childhood. What do you wish your father did more for you? Like, what do you wish that was different? Some people will say, I wish I spent more time with my dad. Some people will say, I wish I had a better emotional connection with my dad. I wish we had a better relationship. I wish, we went on more adventures, or, I wish we were better friends, maybe, especially as you get older. And he said, I've asked that to hundreds of people, and not one person has ever said, I wish my dad provided more. Like, sure, some people will say like, oh, it would have been nice to have more money as a kid, but at the sacrifice of dad not being home, dad not being present. Like, I'm sure if you spoke to any person that had, divorced parents, especially as a man, like one of the things you'd wish most is to have that male, that masculine role model in your life. And so there's obviously, it's not cheap to live in Sydney. So, there's a financial cost to everything, but it's also worth noting that you're not just a paycheck. to your family. And I think this really helped me shift my priorities and perspective as a business owner and a father, is like changing how I value myself as a father, as a husband, as a man in general. Like, it's not tied to how much I make. Like, sure, I want to like make enough money to provide for the household so that my wife doesn't have to work, so that we've got like the lifestyle that we want, like access to all that stuff, for sure. But that doesn't make me a better or a worse father. Like, it doesn't make me a better or worse husband. Showing up when your partner, when your kids need you, being there to teach them things, to more importantly show them things as well. Because like we were talking about before, our kids learn by what we do.
Yep.
What they see us do, how we communicate, how we handle situations, by our actions. Like, seeing, I forget the stat, but like the stat, you know, taking a sidestep, for mums, like for kids that have a fit mother, the percentage of those kids that grow up to be obese or overweight is drastically less than the ones that have an overweight and an obese mother, right? Because they learn those habits, those standards of health and everything that comes with that from not just mum, but like mum and dad.
Yeah.
And so it's, even if you're working all the time and you verbally say all the lessons, all the like the habits and the values and standards you try to instill in them, at the end of the day, they're going to watch you and then ultimately replicate that. And so one of the things that keeps me in check a lot of the time is, if my son grew up emulating every single one of my traits, he grew up as a spitting image of me, everything that I do in private, everything that I do in public, how I communicate with people, like how I demonstrate my values, the standards that I have, would I be proud of that? And there's certain things where you're like, I wouldn't be happy him growing up like that. Like, I want better for him. And we can't just say, don't do this, but then we go and do the opposite, you know, do as I say, not as I do. It doesn't work that way with kids, right? And so that is a good reflector as well. Ideally, you have that reflection before they're actually mimicking it, mirroring it back to you, right?
What have been some of those traits that have made you go, oh, wow, I need to work on that?
So when he was first born, like, that first 6 months was probably the hardest 6 months of my life, to be honest, man. Like, adjusting to fatherhood was like incredibly difficult for me.
Was your child planned?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So he was planned. We got married. We decided that we were ready for having a kid. We went back and forth for so long about like the order in which we were going to do things. Like, we wanted our businesses to be at a certain level, and we wanted to be, you know, in a house, out of the apartment, all these things. But then when we like sat down and did the math for that, given how much all that costs and everything, we're like, okay, that's adding a fair few years onto this, and then how much that delays everything else. So we're like, okay, you know, mum and dad are close by, so we can use them for looking after him and doing these things. Okay, like we'll start our family now, and then like we'll work out the rest as we go. And so, you know, that was planned. Lucky enough, and we're healthy enough that first try.
Yep.
So didn't go through much of that testing out period, and it just was wildly different to expectation. So on a couple of counts. So first of all, you know, everyone says that when you have a child, like, you see this child brought into the world, and then just everything stops, and you have this unconditional love, and like, yes, there's sleepless nights, yes, there's stress, yes, you're figuring it out as you go because you have no idea what you're doing, but you know, you look at this child and it's all worth it because you just love this thing unconditionally and everything. And when he was first born, like, the nurses and my wife were holding him there, and it was weird. There was just like nothing. And it was like, well, I trust my wife, so like, I know that he's mine, and I just saw him come out of her. So like, I know that he's ours, but like, there wasn't this instant bond that people kind of spoke of. And then following off from that, obviously you've got the sleep deprivation, you've got everything. And then I was always someone who was very rigid with routine. Like, I love to do things when I like to do them. So like, I was always rigid in my morning routine, get up, coffee, go train, do this, and then like, I'd have my structure for things. And that doesn't work when you have a child.
No.
Right? When they are hungry, they want food. When they need to be changed, when they need to nap, when they need to do things, it's on their time, right? And so no matter how much you say like, oh, they're going to fit my routine, like, cool, good luck with that, man. It just doesn't happen.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. And so it took me a lot to start to become flexible in that routine. And then also having that sleep deprivation, that stress, and there wasn't that instant connection. Like the gap from expectation to reality was like that. And I was feeling shit as a father, because I'm like, is there something wrong with me? Like, am I supposed to feel this way? Like, I haven't seen any or heard anyone talk about this experience. Like, what is this normal? Is there just something wrong? Like, and because of that difference in expectation and reality, like I was stressed and irritable for a lot of the time. Like I wasn't very present. Like I had a short fuse. Like it took, like, even though I had all the tools from dealing with stress and like doing this for quite a few years, like it was really hard to implement. Like it was really hard to like pull myself back and then just like fix a lot of that stuff. And I was lucky enough that obviously he was very young at that stage, so he wasn't like picking up all that kind of stuff, but they pick up on energy, right? And if a child is crying and then your energy is lowering because you're getting frustrated and angry, what are the chances of that calming the child?
It's not.
It's no chance, man. Like, not gonna happen. And so, like, I had a couple of mentors at the time, and like they really helped me with that as well. It's like, just check yourself, man. Like, is the tool, like the emotion that you're using, is that helpful for anyone in the room? Like, obviously it doesn't make you feel good, and your desired result is to calm, support your child, like to attend to their needs, and also like my wife too at the time. And is reacting that way, whether you express that like externally or you're just feeling that internally, is that helpful? Well, of course not. And so being able to adjust some of those, like, it obviously takes time. You can't just like, oh yeah, I'll just like instantly change it. But having that frame and changing that along the way massively helped to just bring those emotions and how I was like handling things in check too.
It's interesting that you had that experience, and because for me, I as soon as my daughter was born, I had a very strong connection. So it's interesting to see how different fathers, like, some connect straight away and then some don't. Do you have a strong connection with him now?
Yeah, like now it's awesome, man. Like there's we go in ebbs and flows. Like there's days where like I just love spending so much time with him. Like he's so cool and interactive now. Like we'll just play for hours and like go on adventures. Like for my birthday 2 weeks ago, I asked my wife to get me one of those kids ride shotgun seats. So the little seat and the handlebars that go on the front of your bike. And so when I pick him up from daycare, I'll pick him up on that. We'll go for rides. Like it's so much fun, man. And like that lights me up. That's really cool. And so like there's obviously other days where he's more testing and stuff, but there's that love and that connection now. It just took 8-9 months to kind of come, which was kind of strange, but now like it's like I assume it should be from the start, right? So I haven't been able to find any explanation or what was going on there, but yeah, now the bond is like strong as I'd imagine it could be.
That's awesome. And it's great that we can have these conversations, because not many men speak about it. It's usually, when it comes to childbirth, it's all about the female and the mother, which, yes, they give birth to this little human, but men actually go through a lot of their own psychological battles as well through this period. And for myself, it was actually prior to my daughter being born, because she wasn't planned. So it was like a shock to the system when I found out. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I'm just about to be a dad and I don't have my shit sorted out.
Yep.
But I was actually saying to my partner the other day, like, my daughter has actually been the biggest blessing, because it kicked my ass into gear, and I had to actually grow up and become a man and provide for the family and work on myself to be the best version of me for my daughter.
Yep.
And a lot of men don't understand that. A lot of men, unfortunately, don't show up for their kids. And it's awesome that we can have this conversation, two men showing up for their kids, for their family, and knowing that, yes, it's hard, but to be a good parent is hard.
Yeah.
Anyone can be a dad, but not everyone can be a father, you know, and really have that deep connection and give those lessons and turn up each and every day for yourself and for your family. It's so pivotal, especially in this days and age. Like, divorce rates and everything is so high.
It's so hard, like trying to juggle, like being a partner, a parent, like even if you don't run a business, but like, you know, your career growth means something to you. You do that with passion and purpose, and like you're driven in that space. Like, and also on top of all that, or amongst that, trying to find time for your own health as well. Like, I know even just finding time for, you know, an hour at the gym or something like that, for a lot of people can feel selfish. Right, just trying to put everything else on pause and have that time for yourself. It's not easy trying to do all that. Like, one of the things that, you know, we recognized in a lot of the clients that we were kind of coaching, and this is before we started specifically working with dads. This was just like kind of men in general.
Yep.
And, you know, by default, some of them were running businesses, and like a lot of the stuff that we worked on them with in terms of like their mindset and like those frames obviously then correlates into relationships and home life too. And we notice a lot of guys that don't know how to handle stuff at home. They don't really know how to be that present dad. They don't really know how to handle some of those, have those conversations with their partner, because they've been together that long. It's kind of a little bit stale, and they end up avoiding that by burying themselves in work. And so there's the problem at home that they don't know how to handle. They don't know how to maybe have that conversation. Like, they haven't been taught how to be a dad. Like, they haven't evolved into that next, you know, role. But they know, okay, well, I'm here to be the provider, so I'm gonna work harder. I'm gonna work longer. I'm gonna do that. But the problem with that then is they are then basing their worth as the father and husband on making that money and on the business. But then also it eventually builds that resentment, because if the wife or the kids bring a need up that's not being met, you know, maybe the wife just wants to go on a date night, just wants to be intimate, wants that connection, wants, you know, like dad to be present with everybody, then if there's no acknowledgement or ownership, it's like, well, I do all this for you, why are you so ungrateful? I made, like, you've got everything because of me. And they can't say that, well, that's not enough. Like, I don't want all that extra money. Like, I don't care about going on that holiday to Europe. I don't care about you having a Range Rover for your company car. Like, I want to have a relationship with you because you're my dad, right? And that emotional connection and vulnerability is not natural for a lot of guys, right? Especially older guys and guys that have been brought up from that type of father themselves, as to, you know, you don't express vulnerability. You don't talk about how you're feeling. If you're burnt out, you're tired, like, suck it up, just keep going, just get it done. And not knowing how to regulate, communicate, like, handle that kind of stuff, and it just all ends up internal. It can be hard for a lot of guys to kind of deal with, right?
Definitely. And I'm very curious. You mentioned before around your mate asking you a question about what are some of the things that your dad didn't kind of do for you as a kid that you now feel like you have to do for your own child. What are some of those things?
For me, it's like that emotional connection.
Yeah.
So dad had, he actually sold a couple of years ago an accounting firm. And so, like, financially did very well, provided for us, and was lucky enough that because of owning the business, still had enough flexibility with his time that he was always there to take me to every single sporting practice. It was every single game. Like, he was always there for that stuff. So I cannot fault him. I love him to death for that. But something, I'll get that back to that in a sec. But I think one thing that I wish I had more from him was that emotional connection and that relationship. And I know that wasn't even an avoidance thing. Like, looking at the way that he was brought up, like, he had two brothers, his dad was in the military, you know, born in the late 60s. So, guys don't express emotion, guys don't hug, guys don't do any of that kind of stuff. And so I know why he's like that. If like I can rationalize that. And so like even to this day, like I think I've hugged him maybe twice, and I don't think I've ever heard him say I love you.
Really?
Right? That's not his love language. So physical touch, words of affirmation, not going to get it from him. I recognize that. But he shows up in other ways for me though. Like gestures, quality time, like doing all those other things are how I know that he cares for me, that he loves me, that he does all these things.
So you have a strong relationship with him now?
Yeah. So like, we've got a strong relationship. There's still like that, emotional communication that is still like like blocked a little bit. But there's no like negative feelings or charge or anything or resentment or blocks or anything there. It's just like, well, I know why he's like that. And so that's one of the things that I want to make sure that my son has. And even talking to him a couple of months ago, because my mum will look after my son on Wednesdays. And then so when dad gets home from work, he gets to spend a couple of hours with him. And he just says how much it lights up his day. Like he'll get home and then my son will run up to him, like my son's obsessed with him, loves him to death. And he just says, no matter what kind of day he's had, it just melts the day away. Just forgets instantly. And he was saying how different that is from being a parent now that he's a grandparent. And I was like why? Like, what's different about it? And this is one of the things that like really made me want to change how I do things. He's like, well, I didn't get that. He's like, I go to work at 6, 7 in the morning, and by the time I get home, you guys would be asleep. So like he missed most of that interaction of that age because he was always working. He'd work 5, 6 days a week, and the other day he'd be like so tired. Like he'd look after us while mum was working or doing whatever, but wasn't there for those experiences. Not because he didn't want to be, but because work called, had to make money. In that time, you could get away as a family with like one sole income, which just means one parent's got to be away most of the time, right? And so that was him. And so that's like, appreciate the hell out of him and absolutely to death for everything that he's done and continues to do for us and the family. But like all of us, as part of our just genetics, we always want to do like one better than our family, right? Than our parents. It's like, this part was awesome. This was, I'm lucky enough to be able to say like nothing was traumatizing, nothing was horrible. But we find things that like, okay, I want to do this better. I want to be able to do everything you did and more. Yeah. Right? And so it's just that level of growth, intergenerationally that we kind of strive for.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me and my dad was that lack of emotional connection as well. Yeah. Which is why I have such a strong connection with my own daughter. Yeah. And then in saying that, I now see my dad with my daughter, and it's like, I never got any of this when I was kids. Like they're totally different. And it's like, what the hell? You're a different person, man. But it's awesome to see like a little human just bring so much happiness. Yeah. Because growing up, like I have so much respect for him. He was a provider. He built his own business, started like 16, got kicked out of school, built the business up, was always working. Yep. So we financially, we were sweet growing up. But he wasn't there as much. And when he was there, we never really had a strong relationship anyway. So there wasn't that connection. But now I get a couple of I love yous from now and then, but he's starting to open up a little bit, but it's still, there's a bit to work through, which I feel will come the time. And I've really started to notice the difference, like when my daughter was born, because it brings it rejuvenates them a bit. Yeah. So it's awesome to see.
Yeah. Well, because also we have to consider that when we were that age, that they were still figuring everything out for the first time. Yeah. Right? That like now as grandparents, they've been there, done that, so they know how to parent a little bit. They've grown into that, and they don't have the stress of being so much the provider, working so much, having that stress and all that stuff that goes with it. Now it's the fun part for them, so to speak, right?
And they can give them back after, Yeah,
of course, right? Have some fun with them, load them up on sugar, like, here, go back to mum and dad, good luck with that. But no.
I want to ask you, what type of man are you teaching your son to be?
That's a good question. I want him to be a man in control.
Okay.
In control of his emotions, in control of like as much of his situation as he can be, like taking that ownership of like your emotions and like the situation that you're in, I think allows us to have a level of change our direction when needed. Like if we're not where we want to be, if there's things that in our life that aren't going the way that we want them to be, having that ownership of that situation allows you to change course, to change what you can control, as opposed to playing the victim and just kind of throwing your hands up in the air, like, oh, well, it's not my fault because XYZ, because of this person or that thing, you know, I couldn't control this, so, you know, I'm just here, and then just accept it. And so I want him to be the kind of man that can take that ownership, has the discipline to honor his word, like to himself first of all, but then to other people as well. Because I think if you can have that, if you can be in control of your own self and you have that discipline, then you can navigate life whatever way you want to go. Like whatever path you choose to take, I feel like you can be successful if you've got those traits. And like you stack honesty and communication on top of that, being able to communicate like effectively without offending people and being truthful, then you can hold those boundaries like we said before. And so trying to action those myself, so he learns that, you know, it's okay to say no to people. You know, you don't have to worry about offending people. If you are true to yourself and to your boundaries, and other people get upset by that, provided you weren't, you know, being a dick about it, then that's not on you to go and people please. And especially because like I used to be a yes man. I used to be like that people pleaser. Like, have you ever read the book No More Mr. Nice Guy?
I've heard of it and been told to read it.
Highly recommend
Yeah.
it, man. So No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. Like, if for most people it's really gonna hurt your ego.
Yeah.
And so like it did for me. I've read it about 5 times and I've suggested it to just about all my clients. And reading that shines the light on a lot of the frames that we tell ourselves as to the actions and the things that we do. So especially if you're like a yes man, we put other people's needs ahead of ours, like we don't have those boundaries, but we tell ourselves that it's because we're nice, because we're doing things for other people. And he really breaks it down as to why some of those traits are just covers for being like resentful manipulators. And it is really, it's hard to read, like, to be honest, like when it hits you so accurately. Like I've had a number of people read that and like message me saying, how did he know that about me? Did he have an insight into my head for the last 10 years? Like insane level of accuracy, the way that he describes things, but then also looks into, well, this is the underlying intention behind that. Like the underlying intention for most nice guys is, if I'm nice to people, if I say yes, if I do this thing for them, if I do all these things, you know, especially for guys, when it comes to girls, if I do all these nice things for her, then she'll sleep with me, then she'll love me, then like I'll get my needs met. And so like that's the underlying intention. If I do this thing for someone else, they'll do this thing for me. But we don't communicate any of those needs or those hidden contracts, as he calls them.
Yep.
And then so where that comes unstuck is if that person doesn't reciprocate that need, that unsaid contract, then that builds resentment, builds frustration. And so the thing that you said you were doing because you're a nice guy, because you were doing it out of generosity, well, and that reciprocation doesn't happen, then you get frustrated, you get annoyed. And that's why like you see some people that will go from one spectrum of, you know, I love you, I'm doing all this for you, and then they kind of get rejected. If you're this, you're that,
Yeah.
you know, they just like absolutely lose it at this person that they love or just showed all this for, but they're expecting a response. And so one of the biggest things that reading that book like taught me was letting go from expectation. Like there's nothing wrong with doing things to be nice, but just recognize, are you doing it with the expectation of something in return, or are you doing it just because you genuinely want to? And if you are doing it with the intention of having something in return, communicate that so that everybody's on the same page. And if they say like, agree to those terms, wonderful. You can cash that in, that's fine. Or if they say, no, like thanks, but no thanks, I don't want to agree to that, then that's fine. But that conversation or that acknowledgement is like hard for a lot of us.
Yeah. Expectations are a big one. I think we all set expectations on a lot of things, and it is hard to let go of them. How have you kind of let go of those expectations?
I think acknowledging what I was doing, why I was doing things, but also for me, a lot of my worth was placed on that validation from other people. So for me, my worth was based on my body. Like if I was very shy, very introverted, and I figured if my body was good enough, I could get away with having a doorknob for a personality.
Yep.
Like if I had a good enough body, then like I wouldn't have to talk too much, and then like I'd have women interested in me. Like that was the philosophy that I was telling myself. And then, not that this was an original intention, but then learning to cook, becoming a chef, also played into that as well. If I can look good, if I can cook them nice food, I'm starting to stack the deck in my favor, right? And all of this is placing so much worth on the things that I do for other people or things that I provide, as opposed to like who I am as a person. And so even if you get someone to fall in love with having all that, then they don't know the real you either, right? And then they're only infatuated by you, provided that you still keep cooking for them, that you still have, that amazing body, that you still do all these things. And so it took a long time, and I still have a high worth on my health and my body. I've shifted that massively to know that like my confidence and my worth isn't based on how I look.
It's for you, not the validation from others.
Like, it's definitely like it's for me, and it's like the standard that I like to hold as well. Now also for my son. But for a long time, that's where I placed my worth. And so I figured that if I was all these things, if I was a yes man, I said yes to like the things that the girl wanted, if I did everything that they need, if I looked good, if I could cook, if I could tick all these boxes, then how could they not love me, right? And like I'd get all my needs met that way. But it wasn't fulfilling. And then you get in those situations where someone rejects you, or you don't get the girl, and then you're telling yourself that same story of nice guys finish last. Right? Because they go for the bad guy, or the guy that treats them like shit and everything, the guy that has boundaries, the guy that's brutally honest. And it's so confusing, right? And one of the things that I learned as well is trying to make everybody like you is a futile task. Like there is no point in trying to make everyone like you, because they purely won't. And realistically, you probably don't want everyone to like you. Like there are going to be people out there that have questionable values that you probably don't want to be associated with anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And so being, I think, respected, especially as a man, is a much more desirable direction. And so that comes also back to setting boundaries. Like setting those boundaries of, no, I won't do that, or yes, I will do this if you do this for me. Like having that open and honest conversation, and it's just not blunt to the point of being rude, but just, this is where I stand, what I will and what I won't do. Are you okay with that? Yes or no? Like, and then there's no hidden contracts. There's no miscommunication. Like, it was laid out from the start. And some people won't like that, but at the very least, they'll respect you and say that at least he was honest.
Yes.
I would much prefer to have people, you know, like, now that I've gone through all that, I would much prefer to people say, like, you know what, I really just don't like him, but I respect him because he was honest with me and, you know, he said that from the start, as opposed to that, oh yeah, he's nice, like he does this, like he just like that limbo of that wishy-washy, you know, people pleaser kind of zone. And I guess that's where I've got to with that journey.
Yeah, you can't make everyone happy. And it's funny the things that we do to make people like us, especially women.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like, I think every guy's been in that space where he's pretended to like something or be into something, whether it was like a style of music or like whatever it was, just to, you know, have something in common with a girl or to, you know, to please, to get on a good books, whatever. And, you know, it's something that you eventually figure out is probably not a great strategy as well if you're constantly changing your persona and whatever. But, you know, not everyone kind of gets stuck in that cycle. But I think a lot of guys would benefit from reading that book.
I want to move into the topic of energy, especially for men when working all day, being fathers, maybe sleep deprivation, not exercising as much. Low energy is a big thing in society right now.
Yep.
Which is then causing, I'd say, higher stress levels, obesity, all these different elements, which then makes everything worse.
Yep.
How did we get to the root cause of low energy? Have you kind of found like a common denominator in it all?
So there's three prongs that I like to attack low energy. Like, when someone says, like, I've got low energy, what do I do about it? I think the first point of call for getting better faster at anything is to, first of all, stop doing the stuff making you worse. So we know that sleep is crucial for energy, for everything, health, performance, all that.
But you got to build a business, man. No sleep.
Yeah. But also, like, I know that's like the common thing. And that used to be my default too. I've got stuff to do. I'll just get up early, extra coffee, boom, go. Right. But then eventually your effectiveness goes down. So it's like, well, on the same level of thinking, I want to get jacked, ripped, and stronger and fitter faster. Why don't I just train for 5 hours a day? Well, more isn't gonna get you faster results. Like, you get to that point of diminishing returns. And so I think that's also, you know, we can go into this later if you want, but like differentiating between being busy and productive.
Everyone says they're busy these days.
Everyone is busy, right? But if you don't have a marker of like what you're trying to achieve to measure yourself by, then how are you going to know if being busy for the last 12 hours was actually effective? Because anyone can be busy, but are you doing the stuff that's moving the needle as well? Because then, I think for me at least anyway, a good gauge of being, if I'm busy or productive, is if I'm busy, I'm stressed. Because there's always stuff on my plate, but I don't feel like I'm progressing. Yeah. If I'm productive, I get the dopamine from achieving tasks and from usually doing a hard thing, because the stuff that's, you know, going to move the needle the most is usually the stuff that I avoid, right? And so I get that little dopamine from doing stuff. I feel like I've accomplished something at the end of the day. Like when I sit down for dinner with my wife and she says like, cool, how was your day? What did you do? If I was busy, I was doing this, but I don't have anything that I'm proud of, cool, I probably wasted the day. I was like just responding to emails or fluffing around from tab to tab, and I just didn't do anything meaningful.
Yeah, procrastinating.
Yeah. But if I can say, you know what, I finished this marketing campaign, I did this, I had all these calls, I did this, and like I can say that like proudly, then I know I did something of meaning.
Yeah. So many of us are just mentally masturbating all day.
Pretty much, man. And like even just in consuming all the information when it comes to productivity and like business and everything else, at the start of last year, I had to take pretty much a hiatus from reading and podcasts and just like any form of like new information, because I was just on this mental masturbation train of like absorbing all this stuff, but not doing anything.
And it actually drains you more.
Yeah.
I felt I actually had to do the same thing, because every day I was like, I got to learn something. Right? Yep. I got to listen to this podcast. I got to do this audio book, read whatever.
Yep.
And then you just get a information overload, and it just becomes too much that you actually don't even do anything with it anyways.
But even if you do though, like you end up listening or consuming so much information that you find conflicting information, and then you do one thing for a week or two, and then you find new information, so you do another one, and then you do another one, and then you've tried all these different diets or marketing approaches or like these different strategies, and like, realistically, if you stuck with any of them long enough, you would have got the result.
Yeah.
But because we've pinballed from one to the other, then we haven't stuck with them long enough to actually get the desired result. And we say like, oh, well, I've tried all these things and none of them work. It's like, well, what's the common denominator here, mate? It's you. So like, you can't stick with it long enough to make it work. And so I think being able to either have a better approach, whether it's if you're disciplined enough to have that plan, to stick with it long enough, but also it can be even better if you've got like a coach or a mentor that has either done it themselves or helped other people to do that, provide, I guess, guidance and accountability along that way as well. Because I know for me personally, if I seek to go and do something and I find this plan and, you get like those newbie gains, so to speak, that initial progress and that excitement and that dopamine at the start, and then you get to that point of, okay, they kind of like plateau a little bit. And if you don't have someone to say, cool, you're exactly where you need to be, that's part of the journey, right? How many people do this with fat loss, right? They start moving more, or they cut some carbs or cut some calories, and then they get that fat drop, and then they plateau and they don't know what to do the next, and then they either give up or they try something else, right? Because they don't know what to do next. But if you've got someone that says like, cool, this is exactly where you need to be. Or now that you're here, tweak this. Now that you're here, do this. Because there's like the sequential order to a lot of things as well. I think that can be really helpful in seeing things out with enough consistency and enough like of a timeline to get that desired result as well.
Yeah, the big thing that I try and focus on is like, what are the 20% of the tasks I can do to get 80% of the results. So even if I spend time doing 80% of the tasks, I only get 20% or even lower, like you're just wasting your time.
100%, man.
And even like, I still get caught up in days where I'm just doing mindless things. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? But then you notice the difference on the other days when you're like, all right, landing this new client, did this awesome podcast, actually making progress. I feel so much better about myself. So it's like, how can we do more of that?
And I think that's where a bit of self-reflection comes in. Like most people, like I'm guilty of this myself. Like we only do, if we do it at all, self-reflection is when things aren't really going so well. Like some people try to do a little bit more introspection. Cool, like what's not working? Like how did I get to here? But I think it's also worth looking at like when you have those really productive, those amazing days, what did you do to enable that? Like, what did you do in the morning? What didn't you do in the morning, maybe? Like, on the days that you're not productive, for a lot of people, one of the first things they did was maybe they had a poor night's sleep, and then the first thing they did in the morning was open social media and just scrolling, just getting that dopamine feed. So from the start, it's already hard to come back from that. But on the flip side, on the days that you were hyper productive, maybe you had a good night's sleep, so you did certain things differently in the night before. You weren't working late on a screen. You had dinner early enough. Like you did all these things, had a great night's sleep. You woke up, went and trained, like ticked all those boxes, and then you were clear-headed, you were focused, you were just like on it from the start. And when we find that recipe for success, then it's just a matter of like replicating it, right? And then so on the days that you don't feel like that, it's a lot easier to then look at, oh, well, that's why, because I thought it would be okay to stay up that extra 2 hours at night responding to emails or on my screen, tanked my sleep, and the next day I was tired, unfocused, brain fog, couldn't get into the zone. Cool. Like you've now got personal proof of how that affects you. And so like if you've got something like an Oura ring or a Whoop strap, it's even more evident how some of those habits affect your sleep, then your productivity and like your ability to perform like mentally and physically the next day as well. And so I think for a lot of people that when you have that personal experience, it carries so much more weight. Like we've all heard people say what you should and shouldn't do for energy, for focus, for productivity, for like a good night's sleep, for all these things. And it's like, yeah, like cool, I've heard that a million times. But unless you see your own stats and have your own experience, then it doesn't carry as much weight, I think.
What I've realized, because I got Whoop as well, and what I've realized is when I've had a really fulfilling day, in, like I've made progress that day,
Yep.
then leave my phone, about half an hour before I go to bed, have a nice warm shower, just relax.
Yep.
I've had my highest sleep scores.
Yep.
But when I'm working, stressing, don't have a shower and just go straight to bed, or I have like a meal before bed as well, that affects me too.
Yep.
My results, like, because I did it this morning actually, I was like 20 something percent.
Yeah.
So I was like, fuck that. Because I finished with a client late last night. I was like, I'm starving.
Yep.
And then I resulted in having Oporto. I was like, oh, fuck me. And then I got up early and trained this morning. But yeah, you notice those little differences, but you're not gonna be able to identify them if you don't track them.
No.
And that's why I love like Whoop.
Yeah.
So
you can be a lot more intentional with things too, right? Like there's always going to be times where you just get caught out. Like your meeting goes for an extra hour, and that just so happens to be the day that all your prepped food was gone in the fridge, and then so you resort to those options. There's always going to be those things. We don't have to be so rigid about it, but as well, like cool. I know that this isn't going to be the best night's sleep or whatever, and then you've got that grace for yourself as well. I think which can be helpful, so people just aren't so, I guess rigid or like hard on themselves.
Especially when you have kids too, like you just don't know what they're going to throw up during the night.
Yeah. Like you could do everything right for an amazing sleep. Cool. Based on my history, this is going to prep me for an amazing sleep because I've got a big day tomorrow. And they'll wake up 3 times to the night because screw you, Dad.
Yeah.
Right?
My daughter was up at 4:30 this morning vomiting. So that was great fun.
Yeah. Great way to wake up.
I was like, thank you so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you don't have to have a really in-depth routine. Some people get caught up on, I gotta have this massive morning routine, sleep routine. It can really be that simple of get up, go for a walk, go to the gym, and then come back and just take 10 minutes to yourself and do a bit of a morning meditation or something. Like for me, it's get up, go to the gym, come back, make my brain juice. I've actually started incorporating that into my morning routine. And then I sit out the back here and just play some meditation music and just have like 10, 15 minutes to myself and just reflect. And then usually whatever comes up to me, I write down in a notebook, and then that gets me going for the day.
Out of curiosity, do you sit outside or inside when you do that?
Outside.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, just because I got like a little lounge on the deck there, and I just watch in the backyard, and the birds are chirping, so it's really relaxing. Yeah. Just really sets me up to have a good day.
Yeah. And especially when you incorporate, I think the environment is a huge pillar which massively reduces the need for any other stuff when it comes to like routines, like just trying to sync your circadian rhythm up, like with morning and night. Like morning, cool, get some movement and spend 20 minutes outside. Like you can stack that with your meditation or your breath work or your intentions. You can stack it with having your breakfast or your coffee, checking your calendar for the day, whatever it is, but having that time outside with that natural light. At night, if you can't spend it outside, like obviously dimming your lights, setting it up like the sun is going down, like you're in sync with nature, then you allow your internal mechanisms of your circadian rhythm to do all the heavy lifting. You don't have to worry about some crazy sleep stack. You don't have to worry about doing this, meditation and breath work and standing on your head for 30 minutes to try and, calm down for bed. You've let nature do its thing, and then you might have 10, 15 minutes worth of like intentional stuff amongst that, but you've got 10, 15 minutes. Like that's nothing compared to spending like, a 2-hour routine that's like prepped you for the day. It's like, dude, if you're spending that much time to get up and then the same at night, that's 4 hours a day on getting ready to do the thing.
It's like, what the fuck are you doing?
You're just wasting so much time at that point.
It's like a procrastination in itself. But I feel like they do it to make themselves feel better about not taking action.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's a procrastination. It's just avoiding the thing. And then you become so rigid, like mentally of, I haven't done my routine, so I'm going to perform shit. I can't do it. Like I haven't done this. And you get frantic and like so anal about it that's not healthy either, because then as soon as you're out of routine, maybe you got to travel to go and do something for work, or you got to do something else that you don't have access to all those things. And then what? Like you're so fragile to your routine that it's not really working for you. It actually becomes a hindrance in that point.
It's just like relax, bro. Like live life a bit, Chill. I want to bring it back to Primal Energies. Give it a quick plug before with the brain juice. I really appreciate you sending that out to me. As I said, I've been incorporating that into my morning routine tastes good, I feel good doing it. And so you got the brain juice and you have is it the tinctures as well?
Yep.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about them and how can people get onto it?
So the brain juice is a coffee alternative, a blend of ceremonial growth cacao, lion's mane extract, which is a mushroom used for brain health, cognitive enhancement like focus and flow state, and then cordyceps extract, which is a mushroom used for stamina and energy, and it just like you'd say. How would you say it tastes?
Tastes good. So I have water and then also add milk to it as well, just to kind of give it a bit of better taste.
Yep.
But it just tastes like normal cacao, and I like it. Cacao,
just
so
like chocolate.
yeah,
right.
So I like it. It's a great way to start my day.
Yeah. And the reason I made that was because someone that's very an advocate about, and anal myself a little bit about sleep. A lot of the time we get to that point where we've maybe had our coffee, and then we know that extra coffee is either going to upset our stomach, we get a little bit jittery or anxious, or maybe it's later in the day, and that extra cup of coffee is just going to tank your sleep. Cool, I'm going to feel good for the next maybe hour or two, but then I'm not going to be able to sleep properly. Because of the mushrooms in there, you can have that flow and that little bit of energy, not in the same way that coffee does in that terms of that sharp peak, but it's just that gentle roll of just getting you through the afternoon, so that your mornings can be just as productive. Sorry, your afternoons can be just as productive as your mornings. And so when you do switch off, when you get home, you're not still worried about work stuff. You can be present with your family because you've been productive the entire day and not just peaked in the morning and then trailed off for the afternoon. So that's the intention there with brain juice. And then the other tinctures I've got there are Relax Blend, which is a blend of rhodiola rosé, reishi, and then chamomile. So that is there to support stress, anxiety, sleep. It's got adaptogens, or the mushrooms and rhodiola adaptogens, so they help your body adapt to stress. So it'll help you just calm, just level out.
So you would take that before bed?
Yep. So I take that when I finish work and then before bed. So because of those adaptogens in there, it just supports your nervous system. So it doesn't make you drowsy. You can use it before bed as part of the rest of your evening routine. But I've had plenty of people take it in the morning throughout the day if they've been a little bit on edge or stressed out, and just help bring you back down to baseline. And then from that baseline, you can either go about your day, or if it's in the evening, then continue winding down for sleep.
So that would help with anxiety as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause that's something that I've struggled with previously. I've gotten a lot better at controlling it now, but yeah, adding something like that into the routine will definitely help someone with anxiety.
Yeah, I used to have really bad anxiety as well, especially social anxiety as well, and having this, looking after my nervous system, really helped just calm that down, and then so just thinking a little bit clearer, a little bit slower as well, then just brings things under control. I found really helpful. So that's the Relax Blend. The Lucid Blend is lion's mane, blueberry, and Bacopa monnieri. So that's there to support brain health, both in terms of your overall health and longevity, because they've found that lion's mane has been helpful in reducing the effects of things like dementia and Alzheimer's, but then also helps with flow state and focus and creativity and things like that. So some people even take lion's mane before bed, and they've noted that it improves their REM sleep and their dreams, which is pretty cool. I know not everyone seems to have that effect, but you can try it. Obviously, the thing with lion's mane is it's not stimulatory either, so you can have it any time of the day, and it's not going to keep you up or anything like that. So it just is for that clarity of mind. But then cordyceps is the energizing type of mushroom, which a lot of people use for either before workouts or when they want that extra bit of boost, just to get through the day. So it's not a sharp peak like caffeine or other stimulants and things like that. It just helps with heart and lung function, so that you can just go for that little bit longer as well.
Awesome. And website, what is that people can tap into?
Primal Energies. So just spelt exactly as it sounds. Go to Google, go to Instagram as well. So on both those platforms, you can check us out. And I respond to all the emails, all the messages on there. So if you got questions or got something that you're not sure of, just flick us a message on there, and we can have a chat, and I'll help you out, see if it's right for you or not.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely recommend people listening, go try it out. Do you have little sample packs or anything that people can get, or
Yeah, we've got sample packs of the
Yeah.
brain juice on there as well. So you don't have to commit to buying a full pack. So you can test it out, see if you like it, see if it's for you. And then if you do decide to buy the full pack, it comes with a free milk frother as well, so that you can
I was
enjoy
just
that.
about to say that. That was when I opened the package and I seen that, I was like, this guy is a legend. Because I hate when you get products that are hard to mix and they just come with no mixer or anything. I was like,
Yeah,
fuck.
it's a pain, man. When I first made it, I tried it a couple times without that, and I'm like, oh, it's like a little bit grainy. It doesn't melt as properly, and no one for the first time is going to stir it enough to properly do it. So I'd only be doing myself a disservice by like having their first experience pretty shitty and then figuring it out. But I'd rather say like, cool, here's everything you need. All you need to do is basically, I suggest people just make it like they do, how they like their coffee.
Yeah.
So if you just like it black, cool. You can just add your hot water and you like froth it up. You're good to go. If you like it with a bit of milk, add your milk of choice after you've kind of melted everything with a touch of hot water. If you like sweetener, however you like creamier, then make it like you would there.
Definitely get onto it. We have a closing tradition where the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest without knowing who it is. So the question for you is, what experience in your childhood that you think shapes your adult life?
So there's one experience that kind of that comes to me then, and it was a different experience because it's not something that shaped me immediately for the positive, but something that has helped me to become who I am today and go through a lot of those growth journeys. So there was this experience when I was in year 5, and with 2 other people. So there was myself and then this guy and this girl who were like, the popular kids in primary school. And then so we were waiting outside this classroom door because we had to go ask this teacher for something or whatever. And one of them was saying how one of the other girls had to, she was taking the bins out for like this old nursing home. And I said, oh, that's so sad. Like in my mind, thinking that like old people couldn't, like they couldn't even take their own bins out. Like that was the reason going through my head. But they thought I was saying that it was so sad that she was taking bins out for pocket money. And so picked on me a fair bit. And, that was quite upsetting. And for me at that point, because he was, I would say, borderline arrogant in his level of like confidence in life, in my subconscious way of never wanting to be like him and make anyone feel like that, I went so far the other way in being so shy and introverted and just reserved because I didn't want to be anything close to what he was like. And so that level of reservation and introversion, I would say, limited me, but it took a while for me to then go through No More Mr. Nice Guy, finding my worth outside of other people's validation and doing all that to get to the point that I'm at today. But without having that experience and then being that way for so long, because of that introversion, I was also very socially anxious and just anxious and stressed out most of the time. So that probably shaped my personality more than any other event that I can recall.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I can relate to that because I'm very much the same. I was that shy, introverted kid, got picked on for being that, so then it just made me worse. And it hasn't been until probably the last 3-4 years that I've really started to work on it and come out of my shell and work through the anxiety that came with all that. But it shapes you into who you are today, and I feel like you have to go through that journey to be the man that you are.
Of course.
So, Harrison, thank you so much. And I think this conversation really sums up that you don't have to sacrifice your health and your family to be successful in business.
No. Like I think if anyone can take one thing away from this, I'd just like it to be that just have open your mind to the possibility of like, what would it look like? How could I? Like in Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he talks about the difference between poor dad and rich dad. And not just financially, but in terms of like way of thinking and level of abundance and enjoyment for life. Is like poor people use phrases like, I can't. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. Like, and we say it like it's a fact. And so if there's a problem that we state it like it's a fact, it immediately closes off our mind to trying to solve that problem. But on the flip side, he says the rich people think of things of like, how can I? How can I afford this? How can I have the time to do this? How can I grow my business to that level, but still only work 20 hours a week? How can I grow my business to that level and still have time to go to the gym every day and still be able to be present with my wife and my kids? And when you start to think like that, then you can find solutions. Like now you can have VAs, you can use AI, you can use other automations. Like there's so many different options out there, but they're only useful if you have the level of thinking to entertain them and then to seek them. As soon as you say, I can't or I don't, then like that's the end of your line. But then having that opportunity, you can find mentors, you can find coaches, anyone that's done it out there. There's so many options out there, but you have to seek them. You have to have the open mind to entertain them.
Yes. Instead of I can't, it's how can I?
Yeah, 100%, man.
Man, thanks so much. You've been awesome.
Thank you very much, man. Love this.